two, one.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. We were going to do a topic that I was very much looking forward to. Myself and Mark were going to discuss um, leaving California. Okay, I was about to give a note to the producer behind the scenes, but it looks like it was all corrected. We're going to talk about leaving California. Mark is a California guy. Have lived here for about over 7 years. Obviously, a big topic for a lot of people. A lot of people have left and are continuing to leave California. So it'd be a great topic to discuss. Now, unfortunately, Mark had a unforeseen obligation involving some premium cable TV show. Apparently, something on Showtime now trumps bashing California over the internet. I don't understand that type of prioritizing, but we respect his decision to have to call in today. But maybe Thursday or next time Mark and I are both available, we'll get to cover this topic. So it's going to be cool. Also, a big announcement coming from Mark Pellegrino soon, next time he's able to join us here. So this announcement is going to be cool. It's exciting. It excites me. And I am dead inside. Thank you, Marilyn, for the $1.99 super chat. Please participate in the chat room today, everybody. Super chats, especially, of course. But I could use your participation more than ever since today is a solo episode. I obviously have a different topic here. Instead of leaving California, I'm going to talk about brands, cults, and politics. And what brought this topic up is that I've been reading this book called The Culting of Brands. A lot of you may already know about this book. If I know some people in this sort of community or like kind of a circle, outer circle, inner circle have some affiliation with Silicon Valley and just the whole world of marketing and branding and what have you. And this is one of those big books, is my understanding. Like there was a book called Purple Cow, an early 2000s book. Purple Cow, which I guess was making the point that something unusual and different gets you attention, which is kind of the greatest form of currency. That's what I'm assuming Purple Cow said. And if that's what it said, boy, talk about being ahead of the curve. I mean, good Lord. He was saying this in the early 2000s, late 90s. Look at what the world became with the development of the internet. So now this book right here is from the early or mid 2000s. It was, I guess, written in the very early 2000s and published, I think, in 2004. And what this author says, you kind of have to take a lot of it with a grain of salt. I say, like, you have to sort of like translate it into objective speak, because he's very contemporary in his philosophy. So he talks about cults. The main point he makes right at the start of the book is that cults are not necessarily a bad thing. Like even the freakiest of cults that you've seen out there, they're not necessarily this evil kind of anti-life brainwashing thing. I think that's the point he makes, that they're not brainwashing. They're not finding isolated, alienated losers and then luring them in and brainwashing them. Actually, the point he makes is, based on his research, that it's usually very well-adjusted, even considerably successful people that are drawn to cults, which I think makes a lot of sense, because you know, there was a book written not by Dennis Prager, but by one of his contemporary Jewish, kind of like semi-secular, semi-religious Jewish writers, that was called "When All You've Ever Wanted Isn't Enough." That's a great title for a book. When all you ever wanted isn't enough, and it speaks to the sort of restlessness, the sort of complacence of living in the modern world. Obviously, a lot of people are frustrated because their dreams have not come to fruition. But then there's a lot of people whose ambitions have. Successful people in business, even successful entertainers, rock stars. I mean, would you say these are by and large like happy people at the end of the day when you meet a lot of them? Oftentimes not, because people, they need more than just their goals met. I think today I can say, based on what I've learned on things that were not included in this book, they need a philosophy. They need a moral code that says, striving for rational goals is your moral purpose. That is producing and earning self-esteem, and of course, being rational throughout. So never putting your desires above what actually exists, what actually is true, never putting faith and emotion above the evidence of your actual senses. So there's a lot to get into in terms of what objectivism offers you. But the fact is, in the modern world, we do have more prosperity than we do good philosophy. So we have a lot of people going back many decades, and certainly it's true today, a lot of people living with no shortage of wealth. You know, they've got a comfortable life or beyond comfortable, but they don't really know what to do with themselves. It's like, now what? You know, now what is the question? Now what? Well, cults offer people a sort of meaning and a sense of community. Doesn't, you know, it has been said that capitalism, you know, drives us apart. That's one of the many allegations against capitalism and the modern world. I mean, there is certainly a kernel of truth in that, because capitalism made it so you as an individual don't need your family. You don't need your community. Your life is much more comfortable if you're trading with many people, obviously, trading services, trading products. The more people around, the better. Don't tell the anti-immigration crowd about that. The more people surrounding you with, the more capitalism raises everyone's standard of living. But this lack of need definitely makes you, in a sense, possibly more isolated in your mind than if you had been living on the same farm that you were born on for the rest of your life. Of course, you now need to basically think about, well, do I have enough friends? And you have now time to make friends, to look for romance. You know, you're not being married off like you would in previous generations. You're not being married off. You're not being traded and having an arranged marriage. And you're also not in some tiny town where you've got like, you know, 3 people you can marry, and they've got, you know, 3 people to choose from. It's obviously where capitalism brings us all into the big city. And then beyond that, it's made us all, the whole planet, one big city, basically. You can connect with anybody around the world. They can be your friend. They can be your romantic partner, maybe your spouse in the future. But it also kind of drives us apart in that we don't really need anyone in particular the way that used to be. So all of this is to say, the modern world offers people a lot of opportunities, but often makes them feel restless. Kind of like, now what? Like people feel they need a sense of community. They need a certain sense of purpose, and cults certainly offer that. And as do religions and sort of culty religion. Now, look, all religions are culty, right? But certain ones are a little more culty than others, like Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. These people, they're much more exclusive, right? So people, they're drawn to this type of thing, points out the author, and he has a certain moral ambiguity about the whole thing, which, again, take this book with a grain of salt. Take a lot of what you read out in the world with a grain of salt, and you need to sort of translate some of it or comment on it in your own mind to sort of get what he's trying to say. So he's got sort of this sort of moral neutrality about the whole thing. Like, yeah, cults are not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, they provide a certain need that people have. All of that is true, but I will offer you that if a philosophy like objectivism had developed around the same time as the Industrial Revolution, then people would have handled the change in a much more healthy way. The modern world would have come with a much healthier philosophy. People would be much less restless and dissatisfied. So people would still be looking for community. They would still be looking for purpose and meaning, but it would not be found in groups of people that shave their heads and do what the cult leader says. See what I'm saying? There is certainly a lot of truth to this idea that the modern world as we see it, as we live in it, does not offer you the certain needs that you have, but we can do better than cults. So the author of this book, Douglas Atkin, he's sort of morally ambiguous about the whole thing. And cults definitely are bad for you if they are not telling you to think independently and to pursue the good life. They are basically they're recommending that you behave in a way that is often not conducive to your life. It can certainly have a negative effect on you psychologically in the long term. And certainly if you have kids, you can definitely default on your responsibility towards your kids. You can definitely raise them in an environment that is very unhealthy, and it basically brainwash them in a way that, basically indoctrinate them in an environment that they did not choose. So there's a lot wrong with cults, but certainly you can abstract the truth that the author is offering, which is that cults do offer a certain need that kind of modern pragmatist, the sort of world of John Dewey that we're living in, it does not provide us easily. We have to really look for it and to find it. All of that is just to say that now certain very successful brands, they sort of act like a cult. They behave like a cult. And the examples he offers are Apple / Mac, I guess Macintosh. Is Apple the company, or is Macintosh is a computer? So Apple is the company. Apple is a cult. Certainly at the time of this writing, it was a cult brand, right? Before Apple was the most lucrative company in the world, it was, before it was one of, a serious competitor to IBM and other computer companies, Apple was a cult favorite. So certain people would live and die by Apple computers. What was their motto in the early 2000s? Think different. Isn't that brilliant marketing? Think different, right? We're not the cool kids. We're not at the popular kids' lunch table. No, think different. How you've always felt like you're a little bit different. How you've always felt like you're a little bit smarter than all of these sheep. Turns out you were right. And Apple gets it. Your fellow Apple users, they get it. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of this necessarily, I would say. Like, it is great marketing, and I just hope people are aware of this stuff as it's happening. So Apple, they also had a famous commercial I think it was in the year 1984, where people are watching Big Brother on the screen, the big scary scene from the book / movie 1984. And Big Brother here, I think, is meant to represent IBM and the other computer companies. And the people are getting up and they're throwing stuff at the screen and they're saying, no more, we're not gonna go with this anymore. In effect, Steve Jobs is calling IBM Big Brother. So the other computer companies, are these computer companies evil? Of course not. They're providing a wonderful service to people in the 1980s. They are propelling people into the future. But what does Steve Jobs in essence say in this commercial? This is Big Brother. Again, if people are aware of this sort of irony, if they take it as a joke, which I think it should be taken as a joke, then have fun with it. I am the king of spoof and parody and tongue-in-cheek marketing. I mean, just from the moment I start here saying, hey, everybody, I'm making fun of a type of news anchoring or presentation or whatever. That I am no stranger to sarcasm, but commercials like that should be taken as sarcasm. I hope people were not actually taking that as, yes, IBM is Big Brother and Apple are, Winston from 1984 or the Rebels or whatever. But this demonization of the other is huge in cults. Every cult has an other. And certainly, usually the other is just anyone who's not one of us. And in the case of cult brands, often it's other companies or something like that, or the rest of society. So yeah, obviously with Apple, as I just described, IBM and the other big computer companies, they are the other. We need to demonize. You see this, JetBlue is another example that the author brings up over and over again. JetBlue was a very successful, unforeseen airline company that sort of also introduced themselves as we're different. We're not for everyone. We're not for everyone. And that was kind of their branding. And they very much succeeded. They very much grew exponentially. Saturn, the car, also very different. I think it was the first and only car company not to pay its salesman commission. So the pressure is off to try and make the sale. The incentive is on to form a relationship with the customer to try and find out, what do they actually need? Do they actually need this car here? Or would this one here, the cheaper one, be better for their requirements? So these sort of outside the box types of brands, they definitely end up creating sort of what you can call a cult brand. And the sort of other that they're demonizing is usually the more mainstream companies. With JetBlue, they're pointing at the impossibly annoying airlines that everyone is sick of dealing with. And JetBlue is saying, well, try us. We're not for everyone. We're more of an exclusive type of club, but we're definitely, we think we feel better than United and Spirit and American and Delta. So this differentiation from the other and demonization of the other is huge in cults and in cult branding. Again, I say there's nothing inherently wrong with cult brands. May we all have one. May we all successfully market a certain product in a way that makes people be willing to pay for it and to proudly promote it to other people and to, in essence, become salesmen for this product. But there needs to be like self-awareness about the whole thing, or it becomes very irrational. I do not want people to actually hurt their own life and isolate themselves from other people over a difference of opinion about Apple versus PC. So one of the things that the author of this book points out is that people are sort of drawn, they buy a product because of the person pitching it to them more than the product itself. And I know this sort of flies in the face of what we tend to think, which is that, the product that speaks for itself. I mean, it should speak for itself, but the way the sort of people it's associated with often has a huge impact on how the customer reacts, if the customer decides to buy it or not. Again, I will offer you, take it with a grain of salt and think about, would this necessarily be so in a more rational society? Would this necessarily be so in a truly capitalist and much more rational and egoistic, that is rationally selfish society? I would offer there's a lot to imagine about a much better society. But certainly in this one that we live in, that does seem to often be true. It's the person who's pitching the product that kind of makes you want it or not want it, which is why so much thought and effort is put into who is the salesman, what kind of salespeople do we want. So much is put into advertising. Which model do we want to model this product? Which actors do we want affiliated with this brand? Another thing that the author points out is that when you are invited to these sort of events, now events are a big part of a good cult/cult brand. Obviously, cults, you meet them in person, and then with cult branding, some of the more successful ones, they have in-person meetups and events. Mary Kay is another brand that the author brings up a lot. Mary Kay, the women watching this probably know what that is. I'm vaguely familiar with it. It is a brand, I guess, a jewelry/apparel brand, maybe clothing, which is apparently kind of cultish. Like, people really swear by it, and they very much innovated in the world of marketing. They made their customers the salespeople. Basically, they attracted customers who love the product and want to basically become salespeople. So they're both buying it and promoting it to others. Then they have events where people can meet each other and talk about stuff and talk about the product. And they're basically letting the customers do most of the marketing for them, which is very smart. So the salespeople need to love the product. And it's not enough to just say, I'm the best salesman there is. Believe me, I can sell anything. No. These cult brands and the most successful ones, they want you to actually feel about this product like you're going to express to the customer, like you actually love this product. So, a lot of these stuff I'm describing here you might already be familiar with a lot of this stuff. But remember, this was published 15, 20 years ago. And maybe 15, 20 years before that, this all might have been complete and total gibberish to most people. They'd never even thought in these terms. So these are innovative concepts when it comes to marketing. The author, the part that I'm reading now, points out that maybe back in the 70s and 80s, there was this sort of like yell and sell approach to marketing, kind of like try to cast as big a net as you can. I think that's what yell and sell means. Just make as much noise as you can, and the right types of customers will be drawn to you. And then then marketers started being more like individualistic, where they tried to connect with a particular type of person and basically like individually sell the product to individuals. And the author is offering that the community element became the winning strategy if you're going to have a cult brand like Apple, like Mary Kay, like Nike. Oh, talk about a brand that people are just, they die for. Adidas, probably. I mean, not any, but a lot of really big brands that people wear, like all Nike, all Adidas. Isn't that kind of a cult brand? I'm not exactly sure how you would differentiate the cult brands from the just regular successful brands, but maybe all successful brands have a little bit of cult in them. But certainly, like when it comes to Apple and Apple in the early 2000s, think different. Very much a cult brand. And according to what I'm reading here, JetBlue, similarly, eBay in the early days, eBay, they were more than just a website where you can buy and sell. There were the super sellers. There was this whole kind of culture of people who congregated over the internet and spoke about the business and all of that. And the people who sold the most and got the most positive feedback had special status. They had special stars or something next to their name. There's certainly a cultish element to eBay, certainly in the early days. And the author is pointing out that this is good, that this speaks to a need that people have. Now, obviously, a lot of people, they would hate the author for this because he is basically celebrating marketing, celebrating sales and the exchange of money. I don't hate him for that part of it. I kind of a little bit dislike him for the intellectual laziness of some of this. And we see this a lot from people in Silicon Valley, people with much higher IQ probably than I have, people much more educated than myself. I feel like they're so lazy when it comes to philosophy, but I guess when you're not used to thinking in certain terms, you end up not questioning a lot of the narratives that you're educated with. So in this chapter that I'm reading now, the author is basically offering a scientific justification for why we need cults. He goes, like, why we need to belong, right? We have this need to belong. Remember what I said earlier. It is true we value other people. It is true that a sense of community can be very, very fruitful and valuable to you in your life. But that doesn't mean we need to be tribal. That doesn't mean this group we should just completely immersed in this group and completely suspend our own independence. I mean, there's a lot of problems with this idea kind of gone unchallenged. But here he goes now with the type of language you hear all the time from all of the intellectuals in today's world, a lot of them in today's world. He goes, we belong to survive. Here he goes. He goes, the great American myth of individualism is so pervasive that it requires countering with the more powerful idea of man as a group animal. This is the author speaking. So he's talking about how, you might think because of you reading Darwin that the individual is primary, but actually it's the individuals who banded with other people that were most likely to survive, right? Isn't that what we hear? Okay, well, Mr. Atkin, sir, I will offer you the following. The caveman and cavemen who developed the concept of property rights and technology and dealt with one another as individuals developed the strongest society of all and could, if they want to, fend off attacks from other tribes, to say nothing of mammoths and saber-toothed tigers or whoever was bugging them around that time. So absolutely, it is true that, 5 individuals are stronger than one individual. But what's even stronger than brute strength? Intelligence, the mind applied to reality. So technology, property rights, capitalism, or early signs of capitalism are much more conducive to your survival than banding with a tribe and being collectivist. And not if that weren't bad enough, then he goes, then he adds, we belong in order to determine what's real. Did you know this, guys? You can only know what's real if you belong to a group. And he brings up this famous experiment from the 1930s. I guess there's no name here that he mentions of this famous experiment, but what they did was you sit in a dark room with a flash of light, a ray of light on the wall, and it never moves once. But at times I'll ask, do you see it moving? And you'll go, oh yeah, I see the light moving to the left, or I see it moving up, moving down. Okay, so it's not moving at all, but you're sitting in a dark room. You're not used to that environment. You're not used to staring at a piece of light on the wall, and eventually you start to see it move. Like, that's basically supposed to say, like, the evidence of your senses is not even entirely reliable. And add to that, then when they put a group of people in the dark together, when one of them says, I see the light moving to the left, now the other guys say, yeah, me too. I also see it moving to the left. So you see, epistemologically offers the author, we don't even really think independently. We need the group in order to live. Leaving out the fact that even in this stupid experiment, the light is not actually moving. So this, if anything, proves that groupthink helps you not arrive at the truth, but to follow BS. Anyway, there's a lot wrong with this, we're living in a cave type of experiment. And I can guarantee you 1,000% that the author of this book counts himself as the exception. He sees himself as a philosopher king. And he and I, the reader, and you, the fellow branding, marketing people, we are above this. We can offer the brands for the little people to eat up. Okay, all of this to say, read this book. It does offer a lot of good insight. I basically focused on a lot of negativity just now, but there really is some really good tips on how to market and how to kind of build a community and to offer a product that people enjoy. And, because with me, so many things are tongue in cheek, I can sort of be both cultish, but also kind of laugh about that fact and talk about it openly. And I hope that's kind of the way of the future in a sense, because if we're going to have cult brands, I hope at least we can joke about it and be aware of it rather than actually be unironic about it. So maybe the sort of ironic marketing is the way of the future. Or maybe marketing and advertising as we know it is going to change as society hopefully becomes more rational. Maybe it ultimately will just be about the product itself, and we can basically put a lot of this behind us, but time will tell. Now, this all brings me to politics, which is sadly a big lucrative career for people. Now, politics should not be a lucrative career opportunity for anyone. Politics should be, the sort of a segment of society where people work to move legislation through the proper channels and to make sure that legislation is properly protecting the rights of the individual as written in the documents, as understood by legal scholars. You know what I'm saying, I hope. But rather we live in a lobby system where each politician is saying, I am the best friend that the Latino community has. I will be a better friend to women. I will take care. I mean, even Donald Trump, the supposed anti-establishment guy, what did he say at the one of the early debates? I respect women. I will take care of women. He said, I will take care of women. He said, hands off seniors, right? Hands off seniors. I will be great to seniors. One of Donald Trump's earliest political statements back in like 2011, when he was first starting to tease his political career aspirations. And there's a lot wrong with politics that have nothing to do with Trump. If anything, he's the symptom. So let's look at every other politician. Rest your heart. Let not your heart be troubled that I'm just here to bash Trump today. Every politician, every political party, basically, every mainstream political entity, they talk to communities, this community, that community. We need to go to the gay community, the black community, this community, that community. Everything's a community, LGBTQ community. Speaking of people in terms of communities, because that is good branding, sadly. Now, if we had a political system that only engaged in protecting the rights of individuals, then the politicians would have no need or incentive to pander to communities, to encourage this hive mind mindset that reminds people like, oh, you need your community and I'm a friend of your community. Sadly, that is the world we live in. And what we need is first in politics to divorce government from the economy, from finance. Basically, what I mean is your right to your property needs to be inalienable. You notice how your rights to your property have an inverse relationship with how successful you are. In other words, the more people want your product, the more that has an inverse relationship to to the sacredness of your rights. The more successful you are, the more your property rights are up for grabs, to the point where when you're at the top, now antitrust legislation is here to just completely cut you in half, and you are treated like a disposable piece of trash that nobody ever needed. Of course, that's very inappropriate. The opposite is true. I mean, everyone's rights ought to be equally inalienable, but if anyone's rights have more of a, if there's more at risk, if there's more on the line, it's the most productive people. Their rights, we can see the benefit of their rights being respected. They're creating so much value for so many of us. So, of course, the change in politics is that the role of government needs to be limited to protecting the rights of the individual. Then people are not then going into a career in politics to pander to different communities, but rather just to prove to you, I can do the best job at passing legislation that properly protects your rights. And, you know, I'll work well with the other politicians, and we're going to protect your rights as an individual. That becomes then the point of politics. You know, basically, I'm hardworking, I pay attention to detail, et cetera, not I care about this community, I care about that community. But I mean, what we need more than that is to address some of the junk that this author was mentioning, saying we belong in order to determine what's real. We belong in order to make meaning. That's the next part of this chapter that I didn't really get to. Yeah, I mean, but like being part of a group gives our meaning to our life. And this, again, is why people end up joining a cult in the first place. And that we belong in order to survive. I mean, these are deep philosophical positions, and we need objectivism. We need reason as an absolute. We need individualism in philosophy before we get to politics. It's all about ethics, ultimately. People need to have moral confidence to pursue the good, selfish, rational life. They need confidence. They need to feel, they need their self-esteem to be enhanced by them pursuing and achieving rational goals, as opposed to altruism's effect, which says the more you achieve your goals, the more guilt you're now accepting, because the moral ideal is to sacrifice. See how it works? So we need a philosophical revolution. If you have not yet read Ayn Rand, I would ask that you do so immediately. You know, and if you're already into Ayn Rand and objectivism, there's a good chance you're somewhat familiar with some of this stuff, if you're like in the movement, so to speak. And I guess the challenge is, you know, lure people in with the truth, with you know, truth in advertising. Talk about the actual happiness and self-esteem that, you know, you've attained from the philosophy, and the success materially as well that you've attained with the aid of this philosophy, and not slip into the cultiness of demonizing the other, you know, demonizing Kant, let's say. I mean, Kant says Ayn Rand is the worst of the worst, and she's probably right. But until I understand that firsthand, I'm not going to go around looking for Kant in order to kick his ass. See what I'm saying? We don't want to become cultish, I would offer. So be motivated by positivity, and let the truth be your North Star, as Jeffrey the butler once told Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. There's a cult show, isn't it? Not like I don't, you know, I just mean it's people love that show, is the point I'm making. Anyway, thank you for the super chats. Let's run through them here. Marilyn with $1.99. I think I already read that, so she just got a free shout out because I read it twice. CJ with $2 Canadian. Jonathan Honig with $4.99 says, did Nikos shave his beard? That's exactly right. I am Nikos, and this is my accent. Marilyn with $2 says, how does he define cult? I don't remember. I'm not sure if he does, but I think he probably did. I just don't remember how he defines cult. Maybe let's just say I know it when I see it. Brian Bonar with $2. Thank you. Marilyn with $5 says, capitalism made it possible to choose your community. Exactly right. It absolutely did. And we got CJ with $2 Canadian says, Adidas is the biggest cult in Eastern Europe. I believe it. Sammy is bored again with 199 pounds and a picture of a fox. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that comment. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is your favorite cult classic podcast, The Daily Objective. We'll be back same time tomorrow, and hopefully this Thursday with Mark Pellegrino. I'll get to pick his brain and yours about the benefits of possibly leaving California once and for all. Coming up at 8 p.m. UK time today, Harry Binswanger is joined by Don Watkins to discuss inequality. It's all happening on HBTV right here on Ayn Rand Center UK. And tomorrow at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 Eastern, Yaron Brook debates Matt McManus. The topic is property rights, good or bad. What do you think? Let us know. What's your what is your gut response to that, or better yet, your rational response to that? Obviously, if you've listened to the episode thus far, you know where I stand on property rights. They are not only good, but you can't. They are a necessity. There's no life without property rights, unless you really, really, really want to be a range of the moment caveman. And in that case, your life is not going to be very long nor pleasant. Thank you for joining us today. See you back here very soon. And we're going to jump over to Clubhouse now. And goodbye.
Thank you.